guys, I'm Carly and welcome back to Belle's Books. I hope you're all doing well and having a lovely August and getting through your Newts TBRs. I'm here today with a cup of tea to do a little book haul for you. I meant to do this in July and then I didn't, and I've got some extras, which is good. So let's crack on with the books. First, when I got paid, I went straight to, because I was in London, Persephone Books, and I picked up The Woman Novelist and Other Stories by Diana Gardner. If you don't know Persephone, it's a beautiful little bookshop in the Bloomsbury area of London, and it publishes mostly unknown women writers in these beautiful covers. They all are grey, but they have beautiful end papers. I will put my tea down and show you. Ooh, pretty. So they all have different patterns inside and they're just stunning. So this is a very small book of short stories by Diana Gardner. I know nothing about Diana Gardner and I just thought I fancy something from Persephone, and it's always just going in there and I'll pick something up because I haven't got many from there, but it's such a lovely little shop. And I've read the first story in this collection, and actually I do quite like it. It was about a family whose a marriage broke down and the mother left, and the implications for the children. It just made you feel slightly uneasy. So I'm looking forward to getting to the rest of these. Reading the preface, which is written by her niece. She wrote a lot of short stories. She did have some of them published in her lifetime in newspapers like the Times, I think, but she was quite intrigued by horror. So I'm hoping that there's going to be something a little bit spooky in here. So yes, hang on, Dan is calling. Hang on, I'm filming. So yes, looking forward to getting to this. Next, I picked up in Oxfam Sympathy by Olivia Sujic. This is her first novel, and I read a little book by her called Exposure, which I did talk about that, I think, in one of my wrap-ups, which is was about writing and women writers. This is a novel set in New York. It's about 23-year-old Alice. She arrives in New York, and I think it's more of a commentary on the way that we lead our lives on social media, because she starts like almost stalking this Japanese writer whose name is Mizuku Himuri on Instagram, I think, and she follows him on social media to such an extent that like their fictional lives or the online lives and real life come together and something goes wrong. That's as far as I can glean from the blurb. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a commentary on the way that we present ourselves in social media, which may be completely differently to how we are in our real lives, and what happens when the two cross over. So yeah, this it sounds really interesting, and I cannot wait to get to this one. Next, you will not believe what I picked up in Oxfam, secondhand. I could believe it either. It was on the shelf as I walked past. I wasn't even going to go in because I go into Oxfam bookshop quite a lot and I do have a problem, but I wasn't even going, and then I saw this. I was like, I'm having that. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Now this had a lot of hype on BookTube, so I was so chuffed when I could pick this up for a few quid in Oxfam. So this is a letter from a son to a mother that cannot read. And from what I can tell, he is unearthing his family history, which is from Vietnam. He's talking about his own real life as well. And but he knows his mother is not going to be able to read this. I think it talks about their relationship, but it's also a commentary on race and class and masculinity. It talks about addiction, violence and trauma. So a lot going on in this little book. I think Ocean Vuong is a poet as well, so I haven't read any of his poetry. So if you have read his poetry, talk to me in the comments below, because I want to know what that's like and whether I should pick it up. So give me your recommendations, please. Next, I got don't drop it. The Rapture by Claire McGlasson. Now, this is hyped in my local Waterstones because it is a book set in Bedford, which is near to where I live and where I'm going to be shortly working. This is a book about the Panacea Society, which I had not heard of before, even though I live in this area. But the Panacea Society, I'll give you a little background because it doesn't say this in the blurb, but I did kind of look it up. It's the most bonkers religious cult I've ever heard of, right? So, if I can get this right, it is a cult based on the prophecies of this woman, Joanna Shapecott, I think her name is. Anyway, she was some self-proclaimed prophet that so she made a few prophecies, a few of them came true, and then she got, by the sounds of it, a bit big for her boots. And I think she went to London to make her fortune. Anyway, she got into the habit of making prophecies, putting them in like equivalent to Tupperware boxes, sending them to bishops or religious people and saying, open this like in a few months' time, bet it proves I'm right. Anyway, she made this box of a load of prophecies which she also claimed would solve all the world's problems when it was opened. And there's pictures of notices in London around I want to say no, maybe it was in the 20s, I've got that in my head for some reason, of these posters saying when Joanna Shapecott's box will be opened, the world's problems will be solved. Anyway, this society is based around this prophet woman, and it was in Bedford. So this book is set in Bedford, and it's about this society. So the premise of the book is about a character called Dilys Baltrop, and she's one of these members of the society, and she makes a friend with a new recruit, Grace, and the two of them become close. And as things go on, they begin to question this cult and what is actually true and what is actually real life. So the blurb doesn't give much away, but I'm just super excited to read about this because, like I say, it's something local to my area that I didn't know anything about until just recently, and it just sounds absolutely bonkers. And the author is doing an event at my local Waterstones in St Neots and in Bedford, so I'm going to hopefully go along to that and learn a little bit more about all this craziness. There's also a museum in Bedford which is dedicated to the Panacea Society, where they had their meetings. I think there was in some houses because members of the society gave money and they bought up a few houses in Bedford, so it's now been turned into a museum. So absolutely crackers, but lots of fun by the sounds of it. Next, I have a book which I have borrowed from one of my book club friends. So Karen lent me this. It is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This is a biography of Henrietta Lacks, who was, I think it was in the 1950s, she was a farmer in Baltimore, very poor. She died of cancer. But what happened was the hospital that she was in took her cancer cells without her consent, without her family's consent, without any of their knowledge. And these cancer cells have been used by medical research since then up until the present day, and they're still being used. So her cancer cells have been used for things like the polio vaccine, I think it is, cloning, and advances in IVF and gene mapping and all sorts, everything, you name it, it's been tested on her genes. And they've been bought and sold in the millions all around the globe. Now, the reason I know about this is because two of the lovely girls in my book group work in scientific research in Cambridge, and they say that they have used her cells as part of their work, and I had no knowledge of this. So this book looks at the ethical questions attached to that decision to take those cells and without asking. And obviously there's been a lot of profit made in this various medical advances that her family have not benefited from, and this biographer has gone to speak to her family about that. So I think it traces her family kind of history and looks at the ethical questions associated with what's happened, and basically just like, you know, gives this woman a voice, because I hadn't heard of it. Medical science is in a completely different place because of her and these genes that she didn't even consent to. So it basically like raises the profile of this woman and says, thanks to her, we now have all these medical advances, but at what cost to her and her family? So yeah, looking forward to reading that. It's a bit of a beefy boy, and there's also some pictures in the middle. I like it when there's pictures in the middle. Let me hold this up to you, because I'm holding my tea as well. So that's quite nice. So I have to read this because I've got to give it back to Karen. Next, in a similar vein, I bought Invisible Woman by Caroline Criado Perez, which looks at the data bias, the gender data bias in the world at large. So she goes through various different aspects of life. So it looks at like government policy, urban planning, medical research, the media, all sorts. And she talks about, and she breaks down and gives statistics and evidence for how all of the data that we use in our day-to-day lives is gender bias, because data is mostly assumed to be the universal male, and it looks at the implications for women in the way that it's detrimental to women to assume that all this data is gender neutral, when it clearly isn't. It's all very much male centric. So I've started reading this. I'm the first chapter in, and so the first chapter was about transport, which is fascinating because it just talks about things that you take for granted, I guess, like urban planning. And this was about the way that transport links are designed with men in mind, because they were designed for male commuters that go to work and come home every day. It doesn't think about the way that women travel, because women have to go and drop off kids or take an elderly relative to the hospital, and they make multiple journeys, and that costs them more and is not designed in a way that makes it easy for them. And it looks at all different countries, so it's the scope is worldwide, and it's just fascinating. It's already blowing my mind, so I'm really loving reading this, although it is making me go, this is atrocious. Also using it for my PhD. Lastly, I picked up a poetry collection, Witch by Rebecca Tamas. I've seen this mentioned a few times on BookTube, and I was really keen to get to it because it just sounds right. My camera cut out, how rude. So anyway, this is a poetry collection about feminism, ecology, the occult, witches, the suffragettes, and all the things that I love. So amazing, amazing, amazing. Yay! And that is my total book haul for you. I better go because my laptop has no memory and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to edit this. But anyway, if you've read any of these books, or if you would like to read any of these books, talk to me in the comments below. I would very much like to have a discussion with you, especially on that Henrietta Lacks one. Have you heard of her? Do you know about this? And are you going to read it? Yeah, so talk to me below, and I will see you in my next video.